I, 15 female, have been living in this house with my mother, 49 female, and my dog, a small chihuahua, for about 2 years. Since summer of 2020, this house was built about 20 years ago, and from what I know, only one person has died in it. The old lady who lived above us died a few months ago, but honestly, it might be haunted because, 1, sometimes I see shadows in the corner of my eyes. I have never worn glasses, but I use my phone a lot, so that could be the reason. 2, yesterday, when I was having breakfast with my mother, I saw a shadow fly across the room. It could have been the shadow of a bird flying near the window, but it was creepy. 3, the morning my mother woke up at around 3 a.m., and she saw that the lights in the kitchen were on, but she is sure she had switched them off. She also said that the blue, semi-transparent tiles that divide her bedroom from her bathroom were glowing. 4, sometimes in the morning, the lights in my bathroom are on, even though I switched them off. I've also forgotten to switch them off a few times, so I probably just have a crappy memory. And it's almost never all the 3 lights, only the one on the mirror. 5, sometimes when I'm in my bedroom, the door handle makes weird noises, as if someone is trying to open them, but it's probably because of the air currents. 6, sometimes I suddenly feel cold. 7, once when I was studying with my mother, I felt a hand touch my back. When I asked my mother why she had done it, she said she didn't touch me. This has happened to her too, when she was at school, so more than like 30 years ago. 7, the lights in the bathroom near the garage and the ones in the garage turn on when you step in the room and turn off a few minutes after. But sometimes they turn on and off randomly. If my house is haunted, I don't think the entity is evil. My dog only barks when she hears the other dogs or my neighbors, so maybe she doesn't think they are dangerous. Additionally, in my old house I used to live in with my mother and grandparents, I didn't have any experiences with the paranormal. The only things I can think about are, 1, my great-grandmother died there a few months after I was born, so maybe her spirit is still here. 2, once when I was a little, I heard a really weird noise, like a mouse squeaking, and it kept going on for a great portion of the night. We have never seen mice, and my bedroom was on the first floor. They could have been in the attic above my bedroom, but I highly doubt it. I also have some questions. I tried searching on the internet, but I haven't found much information. Question 1. If the entity is real and it isn't evil, can I let it stay here? 2. Will burning sage help? If it fails, will the entity become angrier? 3. Should I buy a Ouija board? I'd like to communicate with them, but I read that it can be dangerous. 4. Can I try to speak to them through without a Ouija board? 5. Can dreams be influenced by entities? I used to have a lot of nightmares when I first moved into this house, because I had watched a horror series about zombies on Netflix. I kept having them for about a month, and now I rarely have them. I am an atheist, after all the shit I have been through. I don't think I can ever believe in God again, and I swear a lot, even at God. Can the entity sense my lack of faith? I apologize for the long post, and if this isn't the right community to post this in, but I couldn't find any other subreddits that aren't about fictional stories. I am currently living in the Philippines, and here people usually go to their provinces for Halloween and visit their dead loved ones in the cemetery. I remember when I was 12 years old, I will always go to my grandmother's house for Halloween. Her house is almost secluded to everyone else's, as it in the middle of a rice field. And whenever I go there, I feel this unsettling aura creeping inside me. In the province, people usually sleep earlier, Being a city boy who lived all his life in the city, I can't sleep early like them. So I always stay up all night scrolling through my phone while in bed. An electric fan is always on whenever I lay down on my bed because, as you all know, the climate in the Philippines is hot. And whenever someone walks in front of it, of course the wind will be blocked for a moment, and you would feel it. It feels weird, but always feel that feeling when I'm laying down at the bed. I feel like someone's walking around back and forth, blocking the wind, even if I directly look at where the fan is. I then found out that my grandfather, back when he was alive, tends to walk back and forth in the house my grandmother was in. Chills run through my body when my grandmother said, "Your grandfather died on the same bed you always lay down at." In 1973, my grandparents bought a house that had been vacant for several years. The previous owners had died in a car accident. The mother, father, and 2 small children were killed. 3 older daughters were not with them and were left without a family. They lived with relatives after that. The house was vacant when we moved in, and it was literally frozen in time for about 4 years. I was too young to help, but I remember them removing rotten food from the cabinets and the refrigerator. All their clothes and personal belongings came with the house. Most of that was thrown away. Pictures and mementos were given to the remaining daughters that were in their teens at the time. We lived in the house, uneventful for years, till one summer day my grandmother, my sister, and myself were sitting in the living room watching TV. My grandmother was on the phone with a relative talking away. We had most of the windows open and the front door with the screen to keep flies out. While on the sofa, I looked out to the end of the long walk and saw some people in dress clothes coming through the gate. My grandmother ended her call, and we stood at the large window at the front of the house, looking through the sheer curtains at the people coming up the walk. Right away, my grandparents said, "That's Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's go into the kitchen so they don't see us." In those days, they were equivalent to, "Let's talk about your car's extended warranty." As we silently went into the kitchen and stood around the corner out of sight, we were thinking they would knock a few times and then leave. We were there a few minutes when we heard the screen door open for a few seconds and then slam close. My grandmother was furious. No one was going to just walk in her house uninvited, with kids or not. Knowing my grandmother, she was ready to unleash hellfire on those people. We followed her to the living room, but there was nobody. The breeze was coming through the door, strangely creating a feeling like being at a cemetery after the funeral when everyone had left. That was the feeling I got, and I don't know if that's just the way I would have described it at the time, but it was the real peaceful feeling, as if there was a finality to a life. She looked puzzled, so we walked out onto the porch, and there was nobody, just that breeze blowing through trees. It was the eeriest feeling to see nothing, and not knowing what happened to them. So we went back inside, not saying a word to each other. The next day, my grandmother was working in her garden, and the neighbor came to the fence and began talking about how good her garden looked and how bad we needed some rain. After a few minutes of conversation, the neighbor asked my grandmother about our visitors. My grandmother asked, "What visitors?" Now, our neighbors were old people as well, and knew us our whole life. My grandmother and her went to school together, so there were no secrets there. She said, "The people that came to your house yesterday." My grandmother told her what happened, and that we didn't see them after that. She began to tell my grandmother that they saw those people come down an old holler across the road that led up to the top of the mountain, and there hadn't been a house up there in 25 years. She assumed, just as we did, that they were Jehovah's Witnesses going from door to door, and they didn't realize there was nothing up there. She told my grandmother that it was a man and a woman and 2 small kids. They were dressed like they just came from church. After they came through our gate, they were halfway down the walk when the man turned and hugged the woman as if to comfort her. The kids were walking and playing with them. When they got to our front door, the man pulled the door open and held it for the women and kids, and then followed them in. She assumed we knew them, or my grandmother told them to come on in. My grandmother came back to the house and told my grandfather about what had happened and what the neighbor had seen. He was gone the day before, with my older brother getting water. He just laughed and dismissed it as 2 old women being dramatic. When I was in high school, the oldest daughter came to visit us and look around her old home. She had been gone for almost 2 decades, and that was the first time she had been back from Baltimore, where she lived with an aunt from the time of the accident. She had been there all day talking and telling stories about the old days of growing up in the house in the 50s and 60s. At the end of the day, she said she was going to the graveyard before it got too dark to visit her family. She hadn't been there since the funeral in '68. It was hard for her to go, and it was the only time she had really brought it up. The whole time she was there, and we didn't dare bring it up. Before she left, she opened her purse and pulled a 6x8 picture and showed us the picture of all 7 of them in a family portrait. There in the picture was the man, the woman, and 2 kids from years before we saw coming down the walkway. We were sure of it, but never said a word to her about what we saw. After she left, we told Grandpa, and he made fun of us that in all the years we lived there, not one thing has happened to make anyone think we had ghosts. That there was no such thing. He was right. In all the years we lived there, we never saw anything else or felt uncomfortable in any way. But between my grandmother, my sister, and neighbor, and myself, we know what we saw. A few years ago, my mom worked local for the post office and comes home for lunch. Back in the days when I was at uni, but some days I just didn't bother going in because notes were available online. Mom went to the bathroom and heard me calling her upstairs. She told me to wait. She's coming. But I called her again. Annoyed and angry, apparently. She got annoyed like, why can't this wait? When she finished, she made her way upstairs. But something startled her. My shoes weren't in the entrance hall, which meant I wasn't home. She called me thinking perhaps I put the shoes away somewhere else. There was no one home. She said it distinctively called her upstairs, and it was definitely my voice. Our house isn't known to be haunted, but I remember having an iPod that would randomly switch onto the loudest volume setting, which I never myself put it up to the loudest. And my computer switching itself on. We always brushed it off as a faulty connection, but now thinking of it, it's creepy. I lived in an old cheese factory that was renovated into a house back in 2012-ish to 2016. My dad had passed in that house, and ever since then, it seemed like a ghost party in my house. I would be doing something in the kitchen, and things would fly out of the cabinet, and my cat at the time wouldn't leave underneath the kitchen table at night. I didn't think much of it, because it was an old house, and I was pretty young. I'll be honest, I thought the house was settling, was causing the cabinets to swing open and stuff to fly out. Well, my mom and I moved my bedroom to the office room downstairs, and I kept hearing people talking outside my room. Again, just thinking it was the TV, and just kept trying to sleep. Then something happened that I'll never forget. My door opened smoothly, like someone opened it. I didn't move. I was frozen. That never happened to me. Then I turned around, and there he was. My dad staring right at me. Naturally, I took a second and checked my vision, but it was him, so I started crying. I ran to hug him, and he disappeared. The next morning, I went to get a drink, and I pulled the juice out of the fridge, and the cabinet opened. My dad used to open the cabinets for me because I was too short to reach. I was 9-ish. And I thought nothing of it again, old house, but then my mom's favorite glass cup that was always put in the very back so we didn't break it appeared on the floor, standing up. No cracks, no crash, or falling noises. Just there staring at me. I'll be honest, I ran to my mom crying because that's scary to little me. But thinking back now, I appreciate him helping me get that cup. That's not all the crazy stuff in that house that's happened, but was probably the most crazy thing I remember. Thank you all for reading. So 3 years back, we moved into this home in Arizona. It's in a fairly remote area, actually a few miles out from Old Indian Reservation. Back to the point, this house has been very pleasant for my family and I. Big house, big family, good little neighborhood. Although for the past few years, it's always been slightly odd. I'll hear the sound of footsteps running up and down the stairs at odd times of night, the sound of someone talking. Sometimes even that odd feeling of someone watching us. This isn't just me that has this feeling, it's everyone in the home, besides my younger siblings, who are below the age of 10. We are religious. My biological sister and I are Christians, while my stepdad is Mormon. My mom is non-religious, yet still believes in spirits and demons, etc. Specifically, my older sister has always had this almost spiritual feeling, like she can feel things in the presence of things. I don't really understand what it's like, because I never experienced it. She always told us she can feel something in the home, and that it's just there. By it, I'm referring to Fred, our little household ghost. Enough has happened here, we gave it a name. If something odd happens, we just say, it's just Fred doing his thing, or something along those lines. Recently, though, the past 2 months, Fred has been doing a lot. We hear him running up and down the stairs, opening doors, making noise, stuff like that. The reason I'm making this post is due to the most recent happening. We actually might have caught Fred on camera. We have these Ring cameras in our living room and outside the house just to make sure nothing happens while we're out. But they record throughout the night, and they even have a cool feature that recognizes when a person walks by or a face is seen. 2 weeks back, the camera alerted our phones that a movement was sensed and that a face was seen. Now, it was very late at night and no one was awake. The camera feed shows the bodily shape, wisp or shape moving very rapidly down the stairs and across the room towards the office area. Then our dog wakes up and looks towards the stairs. On the camera, you can see an orb floating towards the general area of the camera. This wasn't too frightening to us. When we saw it, it was just odd. It's almost secured our belief that our friendly household ghost Fred is here. Sometimes we catch glimpses of Fred in the house, like a shadowy figure, flying by into a room or specifically in my bedroom, while we'll be sitting. And in the corner of my eyes, In the room, a large figure will be there, but we look over, it's gone. I'm not particularly afraid of it, just wondering what y'all's input would be on this. If y'all have any further questions, I gladly answer them in the comments, or you can PM me. Oh, and yes, I did just create this account for this purpose alone.